If you ever feel bad for stepping over a crush too much, just be glad you aren't Napoleon. Because his very own wife made him look like a clown in front of everyone all across Europe after he found out that she cheated on him when he was perhaps the most powerful man in the world at the time. And worst of all, he actually took her back after this. Yep, not even being made a cuckold in front of all of Europe could fix his simp ways. Josephine was perhaps his biggest weakness, her being the love of his life, who had a uniquely strong pull over him, being able to twist Napoleon's heart with any little action she took. The two first met back in 1795 at a dinner party held by Paul Bears, who had grown tired of his little frame of benefits, Josephine being very eager to find a new lover. He thought it would be great to hook Napoleon up with his sloppy seconds I mean his old mistress. Josephine, knowing fully well that she was being replaced by Bears, knew her best hope for staying within the French high society was for her to enrapture Napoleon with her feminine wilds. While Napoleon, being just a lowly officer at the time, was looking for an older woman because he believed he'd be more accepted into society with a scarified lady on his arm. The couple set about seducing each other, completely unaware that they were beginning a love affair said to be one of the most memorable in history. Napoleon became so enamored with Josephine after the party that he proposed to her just a mere 6 weeks after meeting her. And of course, Josephine said yes, even though his family didn't like her. And that's putting it lightly, since she was 6 years older than him, and she kinda had 2 teenage kids, and worst of all, she was heavily indebted and had a tendency to spend more money than she had. So yeah, she had more red flags than a girl pushing her OnlyFans on TikTok. But Napoleon couldn't see a single one with his rose-tinted glasses. Marrying Josephine in 1796 after becoming a commander, Napoleon would go to war against Italy just 2 weeks after his wedding, where he would prove himself as a general and gain fame from all his victories. During which he wrote to Josephine daily, writing passionate letters about how desperate he was to see her again, being quite melodramatic during them. He even had a portrait of Josephine which he kept on him during his journey, showing it off to his officers and kissing it on the daily, believing it gave him good luck. But really, he was just down bad worse than a teenage boy stuck in an all-boys boarding school, which he actually was for most of his life. It didn't help that Josephine wasn't nearly as hot on Napoleon as he was for her, only writing back to him during this time very rarely, and in very short and passionless replies, so she could focus on more important things, like her hot new stud, Hippolyte Charles, who she was having an affair with while Napoleon was bleeding his heart out all over the battlefield, though he would discover her infidelity sometime later, like a whole 2 years later, during his campaign in Egypt, after the news spread around camp first, and he became the laughingstock of his men. This news crushed Napoleon, and his spirit, falling deep into despair, Napoleon would also fall balls deep, fall into the arms of a junior officer's wife, Pauline Flores, after he sent her husband back to France on a mission so he could court his wife in his absence. Poor guy, but even worse, she would soon divorce him after he left. So Napoleon is kind of a homewrecker himself too, especially after he returned to France in 1799, where he finally got to confront Josephine on her affair, which led to a dramatic shouting match in the street. Like, imagine seeing the most famous and respected man in France having a bad breakup in the middle of the street for everyone to watch. It was basically the Real Housewives of Paris before television. After Napoleon packed his bags, Josephine's children intervened to beg the two to make up, which they eventually did. Though things were never the same after this. Josephine now only referred to him as Bonaparte, and Napoleon never quite had that same passionate love for her as before, and he continued to take on mistresses on the side while Josephine put an end to her little love affair once and for all. During that same year, Napoleon would seize control of the French government in the coup of 18 Brumaire. Then, in another 4 years, he proclaimed himself Emperor of the French Empire. Pope Pius VII officiated Napoleon and Josephine's coronation ceremony as Emperor and Empress of the French at Notre Dame de Paris. First, Napoleon crowned himself before proclaiming his wife his Empress, when he crowned her. Even though a few weeks back before their coronation, Josephine had caught Napoleon in bed with her lady-in-waiting, Elizabeth de Valdy, and he threatened to divorce her for not giving him an heir, even though his family had pressured him to do so for a long time now, basically gaslighting her to think this whole situation was her fault for him sneaking around with other women. Eventually the two would reconcile, but only due to the efforts of Josephine's daughter. Their marriage once again saved by the kids. They knew what was at stake here, and they didn't want their mom jeopardizing their chance to get that bag. However, this rocky relationship couldn't last forever, since after a few more years, it became clear that Josephine wouldn't be able to give Napoleon a child at all. Napoleon started to search for another wife to ensure himself an heir for the survival of his dynasty. Then, during dinner in 1809, Napoleon told Josephine that he decided to annul their marriage, stating, "You have children, I have none. You must feel the necessity that lies upon me of strengthening my dynasty." Josephine apparently burst into tears and begged him to reconsider, though that might just be for flair. Their divorce finalized in 1810, during which each party read a statement of devotion to the other. Napoleon allowed Josephine to retain the title of Empress and let her keep the Chateau de Malesson. Look, I'm trying my hardest here, guys. Where she lived from then on. Napoleon would go on to marry Marie Louise of Austria, daughter of the Austrian Emperor, the same year. And the very next year, in 1811, Napoleon II was born. Even though Napoleon finally got the son he always wanted, he had to give up the love of his life to do so. This hit him even harder during his exile in Elba, where he finally learned of Josephine's passing. After hearing the news, it is said that he locked himself in a room for 2 days straight and refused to see anyone. Then later, after his return to France, after escaping exile, he would go on to pick violets in her garden and wore them in a locket to remind him of her. And during his second exile on St. Helena, he told a friend, "I truly loved my Josephine, but I did not respect her."